I fell into it. I mean, like a lot of us do, I think. It started out, I moved to California from New Hampshire to go to recording school at Chico State, Chico, California. And I thought I'd get into audio for film. That was my big idea. I spent a summer in LA, tried to get the entry level job at this big audio, facility for film. And they offered me the job after I got back home. I was back here for a couple of weeks and had enrolled in school. And having been back in town, I just thought that going back to LA wasn't going to be the thing for me. And I did another semester in school. And by that time, I was doing sound for bands here in town. And Chico had a really fertile, awesome music scene back in the early 90s. And so I was really busy doing that. And I was managing a friend's band and booking shows. And then it turned into, well, how do we save money on gear? And so I just always have had this entrepreneurial streak. I just tackled it that way and started finding gear and new and used, drumsticks to old guitars. And next thing I knew, a friend of mine who was in a band with me and I opened a music store. And it was just on from there. That was 1995. We opened the store in Chico. Just previous to my arrival here, like Nirvana played in a bar downtown. And at one point, right about the time I opened the store, I ended up working for a friend and I stage managed Sublime playing their last show in the downtown Park Plaza. Somehow a friend talked the city into letting him throw the show downtown in the one block size park. So there was all kinds of stuff going on. We had local music that was incredibly active, 6-7 nights a week. Bands like my friend's Mother Hips, who still tour and play to this day. They got signed to American back in the day, and we're touring and working on their big record deal at that point, which, like a lot of them do, kind of went sideways, but they kept going. So we had we had it all going on. We had local bands, playing their first show. We had local established bands that were touring the West Coast and maybe even the whole country. And then we had bands that would come in from out of town. We did sound for people like Robert Cray and Elvin Bishop and Big Bad Voodoo Daddy. I did sound for them one night the year before they played the Super Bowl. So it was really wild in town back then. It was very, very fun. And coming from Southern New Hampshire, my mind was completely blown. It was awesome. My brother actually was part of the reason I was thinking about getting into sound for film. He was in television. He was a film student in Boston, moved to LA ahead of me, coming out to the West Coast, and he was doing all the behind the music. He was editing the behind the music series for VH1, which was really, it was such a touchstone for people into music, I think, back then, and I'm certain that they haven't done anything since, with MTV or any of their affiliates that was remotely as impactful. And so right about the time we were working with Sublime and they were playing in town and, using my back room at my store as the backstage, they were that behind the music that my brother edited with his team, was coming on, coming on the air. And, that whole event, that show downtown in Chico when Sublime played, that was, it was their last show. So that was a dubious piece of history, I guess, I was involved with. With Bradley passing away the very next day. And I remember they were going to play. I had a music venue actually above my shop. And so after the show, amidst all the nuttiness downtown, because the show completely took over downtown Chico, it was way out of hand. And the band huddled up in my back room at the shop to get ready to play upstairs. And we all just decided that it was probably not a good idea. It was kind of a mob scene everywhere to not, just call the show and say, forget it. And I remember shaking Bradley's hand and saying, hey, see you next time, buddy. And waking up the next day and hearing the news, that's a low light. That's about as close as I got to, kind of, I guess, really any fame or fortune or whatever, or anything really serious, with my guitar business. I've sold guitars to, people like Graham Nash, and sold the bass recently to Tom Peterson from Cheap Trick. And, we encounter people. I had a cool chat with James Burton at a guitar show in Texas one time. I'm working in my booth, and my buddy Randy, older gentleman who's since passed, he really mentored me into this business. I'm just working on my booth in Texas at the Arlington Guitar Show, 2006 maybe, and somebody's asking about this Telecaster. I'm all busy, wrapped up in my head, doing stuff, and I guess I was a little short with him. And my buddy Randy's like, Chuck, probably be a little nicer to James Burton. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, man.
Right.
What can I tell you about the Telecaster? So I think another reason too why I don't have a whole lot of great rock and roll stories is I'm sometimes oblivious, and I think it works out okay. I think people who are, famous rock stars, like I know one of the guitar players from Red Hot Chili Peppers walked right through my booth in LA last month at the guitar show, and I had no idea who he was. I'm just doing my thing, chatting with Joe Blow, cover band guy, some dude and his kid buying a guitar, or James Burton, and I'm just I just yak at them all the same because that's just kind of how I roll. We've had people around us and friends that have supported the business and in so many ways that should be famous, could have been famous, almost were famous. Like I said, my friends, the Mother Hips they're called. They've been at it for over 30 years. They signed to American Records, back in the day, and they worked, as I understand it, with Rick Rubin. And they toured, with and opened for bands like Wilco, some of the bands that we really love and follow. And where they could have withered and gone away when the record deal went south and the label dropped everything. These guys are still doing it, and they're, I think, a great model for bands who, people always have come to me, especially when I had the music store, traditional brick and mortar store, and they're like, well, we're trying to make it. And I'm like, well, what to you is making it? I mean, do you think you're going to be Aerosmith, or do you think you just want to get paid well to play, routinely? Like, what, do you want to sell records? Do you want to give somebody else a cut, or do you want to self-label and do it yourself? And I think the Mother Hips, Tim McGregor and the guys they're the picture, I think, of what a great success can be that's different than people kind of envision it when they're looking at Taylor Swift or somebody else taking over the planet. These guys are out there working every weekend. I was down in the Bay Area having lunch with my buddy Tim yesterday, and they're coming up to play today, and they play every Christmas. They do 2 nights at the Great American Music Hall in San Francisco, a historic venue where the Grateful Dead and Carlos Santana and everybody used to play right there in the middle of San Francisco. And they have their Christmas shows, and they pack the place, and people come from all over the West Coast. So that's the kind of stuff that kind of gives me some chills, when I'm like, being a part of that is really fun, and it's it's not, there's no backstage passes to Coachella to go see the guys, and that's cool. But it's like I'm happy for them that they're successful, that they came out of our little burg here and made it happen. And I think it's a great rock and roll story in and of itself. Whoever pulls the levers to make something happen or not is a decider of people's life trajectory, and
right.
That may or may not be right. But I think it's also a good lesson for musicians is how you handle it. The disappointment of an opportunity like that not working out usually ends in a band just saying, hey, forget it, man. I'm going to try this with somebody else and see if we can crack the nut. And
yeah.
I think the cracking the nut is doing what you love. I mean, that's what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
And that's, and if you aren't on a tour bus, touring the country and being flown to the Grammys, and should you be disappointed if you're still gigging every weekend and you're making decent money and you support your family playing music? It's an interesting thing. I guess maybe one other story is more current, that and it's real prescient in that whole do what you love kind of thing that I'm really chasing here is a year and a few months ago, this guy answered it's a Craigslist ad that I posted with this. I just posted a Rickenbacker 12 string, nothing old, nothing rare. Put it on Craigslist, and a couple phone calls later, and this guy's coming up from the North Bay to buy the guitar to have in his studio. And I met him on a Sunday. We kind of keep bankers hours here. We've kind of tweaked this to be a little more favorable to family life and just life in general. So I come in to meet him on Sunday. Shop's closed. We ended up hanging out for like 6 hours. We just immediately, it was obvious that we were probably going to be friends. And he owns a studio down there in San Rafael, just north of San Francisco. We kept in touch, and not as little as 8 weeks later, I'm in LA at a guitar show, which we do every January, and I got a call from my buddy Ari, and he leaves me 3 messages. I'm busy as heck, and I finally answer the phone, and he's like, "Hey, I was over visiting my friend, and it struck me that there may be an opportunity here. My buddy is Larry Craig, who was the guitar tech for Neil Young forever, and he has some amps. We should talk." And so I called him on the drive home from LA, and Ari and I had basically entered into this, business arrangement, loose and fast and fun. And now I've got like a tweed Fender Tremolux from the 50s that toured with Neil Young for 20 plus years, sitting here in the shop, and a tweed deluxe that, was in the rotation of the backline and hang out with Larry Craig, who's got stories like you wouldn't believe. I mean, way more than I could ever hope to have, driving around the bus with Neil Young and taking all the photos of all the album covers and playing, banjo on Old Man and pedal steel on, whatever other song, So I've met just some of the most colorful people in the world, and Larry's one of them for sure. And then the friendships you make and the things that end up happening being in this business are pretty priceless. Like that one answering that phone that Saturday, meeting my buddy Ari that Sunday. We're best of friends. We're business partners. We're networking, and great things have just kind of mushroomed off of it. And this is like the best job in the world. It's so fun. It's the best. Before I got into the business, I had a lot of fun following music. And I think that's how, like, it's an analog to this for me now is, being into the Grateful Dead in the 80s as a teenager back east and following them around, and then getting into Fish. And Fish used to play, in town where I went to college in western New Hampshire, and they'd come to our parties after gigs, and then I'd we'd find out if we helped set up their sound system this weekend at this festival, we'd just get in for free and have some access all weekend. It's like all of that really fed my desire to get into this business, and then and I think being in the business has maybe gotten in the way of some of that. But then occasionally some things come up too, like another friend from Chico has become really well known as a front of house live sound engineer. My buddy Tom Addison, he was working for Dierks Bentley for a long time, going to the CMA Awards and flying all over the planet with Dierks, and then he got a job as tour manager for Weezer. And Weezer's got some of those songs that we all listen to. They're big radio hits, but Weezer happens to be one of my 19-year-old daughter's favorite bands of all time. And so Tom needed some help with a guitar-related thing and reached out to me, and I helped them with some appraisals of some stuff that got damaged in an airline flight. One of the band members' guitars got broken, and there was a battle over what is this worth, and what should they pay it. And in exchange, I was able to, Tom has set us up a ticket, so I take my daughter to go see Weezer, hang out in the crew bus after the show, and so I get to do little stuff like that, which was huge for me and her. It was a really, really fun moment with my adult daughter doing some stuff, not just coming home over the diner and table telling her I talked to, Graham Nash, and she's like, Graham who?